Hi, volleyball fans, and welcome back to Volley Talk, the podcast created for volleyball lovers who want to dig deep into what is going on in NCAA and international volleyball. I'm your host, Sarah Pavin. I'm an Olympian, beach volleyball world champion, former Nebraska Cornhusker, and longtime pro, both indoor and on the beach.
And I'm Adam Schultz, former indoor player, international volleyball coach, and the show's resident stat guy.
It is just about time for international season, everybody.
Here we go.
So as promised, today's episode is all about VNL, specifically the women's side. We will be covering the men's VNL next week because, the genders alternate weeks anyway during competition. So today is dedicated to the women. For those of you who aren't familiar with the ins and outs of VNL, we will be breaking down how the competition works, how we feel about the top team's roster selections, in particular the U.S., who we think got snubbed, all of that stuff. We're just going to kind of break it all down for you. We also got so many amazing questions relating to VNL and the implications for the Olympics, so we're going to try to address them all. We are very excited about this episode, and we hope you are too. So let's get started.
Let me guess, we have at least some NCAA news to talk about before we hop into VNL. That just seems to be the way things go.
Of course we do. Come on. You guys know. There's always something in the NCAA, particularly the women's side. They always sneak in. So we do have a couple noteworthy transfers to mention today. Both are heading to UCLA. Okay. So Mariana Singletary, the former Texas middle blocker, committed to UCLA, and Lola Schumacher, the former Wisconsin libero. So UCLA made some big pickups in this off season.
I mean, they definitely needed to add some pieces because they didn't have a great season. I'm not sure. I mean, these players are good. They're going to help, but I'm not sure these two moves in isolation move them up the leaderboard when it comes to season standings.
They have picked up some great assets in maybe the least critical positions. If you picked up a great setter or a great outside, those I think could be more impactful, but they picked up PK Kong, as we mentioned, from Louisville, Singletary. So they've got the middle and libero position on lock, but
well, and if you're going to have good middles, you have to pass. So that is important. They need a piece on the outside. And
yeah, they're starting right side, left, quit volleyball due to injury. So there's a hole in the right side. Sheridan Leverett they have on the outside. But they're still missing some pieces. They graduated their setter. So yeah.
You have to hope, if you're UCLA, that this is kind of momentum that people want to come to your program. It's a good step. But if they're going to be competitive in the next season, they need to add one, probably two more pieces.
On the NCAA men's side, many people were speculating that Moni Nikolov would leave Long Beach State and go pro. That is the case. He is going to be playing in Russia. He signed with Lokomotiv Novosibirsk. Excuse my Russian. So, yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good move for him from a career trajectory. He was one of the best, if not the best player in the NCAA all around. Playing here 4 years, are they going to win? Probably. He's that good, but is he going to get better? No, you want to play against the best of the best. So, I mean, he one-upped his brother, as he so charmingly said in his interview, and this makes sense for him.
I'm thinking about the Jay-Z song Encore. I came, I saw, I conquered. He did.
Yeah, and he's out. So it'll be interesting to see where Long Beach goes without him next season. And just an update on the men's Champions League side. Perugia are the 2025 Champions League winners. They beat Zawiercie from Poland in 5, all the way down to the wire.
And it was held in Poland.
Yeah, so that was a big win by them, and it was great volleyball. You should check it out if you have a chance.
Look at that. Our shortest weekly highlights ever. I think we just set a record.
Time to get to the meat of the episode.
Time to dive into VNL. Okay, for those of you who may not be familiar, what is VNL? Volleyball Nations League. Okay. For the first time, there's usually been 16 teams, but for the first time this year, there are going to be 18 teams represented by gender. And this is kind of how it works, okay? So each team plays a minimum of 12 matches that are spread across 3 weeks of competition. For every week of competition, there are 3 locations around the world, and 6 teams get sent to each of those locations. The crazy thing is, you're only playing 4 out of the 5 teams that are in your location at any given time, any given week, which that stumps me.
Well, do you know how they do? Was it random draw who you play, or is it based off seeding? Like the top team doesn't play the bottom team? Like that, it just seems strange.
I'm
to
pretty
me.
sure the FIVB has arranged the schedule to make it as fair as possible. That's what they say. So basically, by the time it's all said and done, you will not have played 5 teams.
Got it. That seems strange to me, but
It is definitely strange, but they claim to have worked out the most fair and efficient way to determine.
and what they mean by that is ChatGPT has determined what.
The FIVB's special algorithm has determined who's playing who and who doesn't have to play each other. So at the end of these 3 weeks, the top 8 teams advance to the final 8. The kicker is that the host country gets an auto berth. This year's host is Poland. They did make the top 8 last year. So they're no slouches is what we're saying. So basically, host team and the top 7 teams after them make it to the final 8, where they host quarters, semis, finals type of deal. The twist this year, however, is that the last place team in the final standings, when all is said and done, is going to be relegated, and they can't play VNL the next season. And the highest ranked team at the end of VNL who did not participate this season gets to play next year.
I really like the relegation piece to it. I think it gives countries that are on the edge, something to try and attain, something to push for. It means you have to compete consistently in the pool play. So I really like the relegation format of it. The not playing everybody in your pool, for me, and maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Well, it's not even a pool. They just send 6 teams, and they're calling the 6 teams like a pool.
No,
but it's
I understand
the teams change every single week of every location they go to.
Yeah, I get that, but you're still not playing everybody, and that's still up to interpretation behind the veil. Like, the conspiracy theory in me is, they're arranging it so that the biggest markets are going to have a chance.
Well,
this allows them...
It's not unheard of with the FIVB.
Right.
They definitely push for the success of countries who bring them money.
Sure, and again, it's a business. You have to make money to make the league run. I get all of that. I just... Personally, I like transparency and fair competition. And this just behind the veil stuff always gets me the wrong way.
It definitely always leaves you being like, what if? You know what I mean? But I do, and you and I have spoken about this a lot, there is something at stake for every level of the competition.
Correct.
Which we have been critical of in certain leagues and formats we've been watching lately. So I like that even though you may blow it and not make it to the final 8, you still have to fight for something. So you can't just coast and be like, whatever, this doesn't matter.
The relegation piece to me is great. I'm a huge fan of that.
So every country, and based on the number of messages we have received when these rosters came out, a lot of you already know the VNL rosters were released a couple weeks ago. So every country submits a 30-person wide roster about a month before the competition starts. And so once we enter the competition, there are 14 players and 4 alternates that are named to the travel roster each week. So whoever is traveling, the alternates, the 14, whatever, they can switch in and out match by match, but those 18 people are set for that week. Once that week is over, the whole 30 opens up again. So the travel rosters can switch week to week, but only the players that were named to the original 30-person list can ever be selected, which has brought up a lot of conversation, and we will dive into that. And another thing is that every single match and every single set counts as far as world ranking goes. You can't, if you want to like hold on to your ranking, or if that's really important to a certain country at this point in time, if you're supposed to win 3-0, you need to win 3-0 or you lose a lot of points, basically.
So I'm a huge fan of the formulaic approach that they took to ranking this, and I want to expand just a little bit on the formula so that it's clear. It's not just about wins and losses. Going into each match, they generate a percentage chance that each of the outcomes could happen. So a 3-0 win, a 3-1 win, a 3-2 win, and then so on and so forth for the next team. So if you win in the highest percentage, you have a smaller change to your world ranking points. If there's a big upset, you lose way more points. So not only if you win or lose matters, but how you win and lose matters. For me, I love the consistency. I love the pressure of having to perform. I love having to show up when it matters, which is all the time at this level. We're talking about the best in sport. I love this way of doing it, personally.
Well, it's so wild. Like, for the first round of VNL, like, and this is updated after every single match. So you can see what those percentages are if you go onto the Volleyball World website for the first round of matches. And even like a 10 versus 11 match, if the 11 seed upsets the 10 seed, the point swing is like pretty big. And you would think with 2 teams that are ranked that close, it wouldn't be the case. But every match has implications, which I think is amazing. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on about relegation is like, you see so much stagnation in the indoor side internationally. You see the same teams performing all the time. You see the same teams at every competition. So I really like the relegation model to just kind of mix things up a little bit, because I mean the contenders are perennially the same indoor and you don't see much fluctuation at all. So that is the Coles Notes summary of how VNL works. Honestly, shout out to Avid Volley on Instagram. They posted a comprehensive graphic recently. So if visualizing is more your thing and reading, go check out Avid Volley on Instagram for their VNL graphic. And they provided a lot of useful intel for this episode. So thanks so much. All right, the moment people have been waiting for. As soon as the VNL wide rosters were released, we got so many messages about the American women's roster. Fair. I had a lot of questions as well. We have pulled together some data here, but I think before we kind of critique and get into everything here, it is worth saying that as the host country of the next Olympics, the U.S. gets an automatic berth. So they don't have to worry about the qualification process at all. As a host nation, you get a team in every single sport. We actually had a listener question about this, which asked, would this fact impact the VNL roster selection? And do the coaches have more time to test out players because of this?
I think absolutely that's the case. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but knowing that you're going takes all of the pressure off having to perform, especially early in the cycle. And given the age of the American roster for the last Olympics, you're going to need a whole bunch of new players. So I don't mind them having a young roster. I still have some question marks about it, but this is the perfect opportunity for a brand new staff who's trying to forge its own identity as a program with incredibly high expectations. I would say anything less than a gold medal in 2028 is going to be a disappointment.
100%.
You need to know how your athletes perform against the best international athletes. And they don't have any benchmarks because these kids have been playing college. There's no comparison. You don't know how they're going to respond. They need to be out in the fire getting worked to see how they respond and if they can get better.
And I think that like the beginning of a cycle is not critical. It's the last 2 years leading into the Olympics that are the most important. The tricky thing is with the world ranking system as it is, if this team doesn't perform, they could really plummet in the world rankings, which may affect things in the run-up to the Olympics. Like, who knows? But they are safe, and they will be there. So we are going to talk about this roster, basically not taking that into consideration. Like, we know that it's a fact, but we will be talking about this roster just, as it is. So that being said, the U.S. wide roster selections came out, and Adam did a lot of digging here of the top teams in the world because the U.S. is among them. Of the Olympic roster from Paris, there are only 3 athletes that have been named to the 2025 wide roster: Jordan Poulter, Avery Skinner, and Dana Retke.
Now, there's a couple things to consider here. One is which athletes are retiring. One is you have a bunch of experienced athletes who may want the year off, which is totally fine if there's communication with the program. There's a couple athletes here who I would kind of expect to either go to World Championships later this year or to be on the VNL roster next year. Those would include Jordan Thompson. I don't think she's going to be done. I don't know what your thoughts are on Washington.
She was injured for a lot of the Love season, so her not being on it wasn't a shock to me. But I think if she doesn't come back for Worlds or next year, I'll be surprised.
So she'll probably come back. Plummer is dealing with some personal issues, which our condolences to her. I would expect her to play. Wong Arantes is not on the roster, which I found pretty surprising. I don't know if that was a program decision or if that was a personal decision for her for wanting a break.
I know she did get married last year.
That was the biggest question mark to me.
Justine was the biggest question for you? Ogbalgu was a question for me.
Fair.
And then Kelsey Cook also. I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah. So a lot of players who probably could have and
Micah
should have
Hancock,
been eligible to play on VNL have either, and I would have to imagine that these were personal decisions to opt out of playing. Like if they wanted to play, they would be on the roster. So it's curious to see where their heads are at. They don't want to compete this year. They need to take a year off, or they're trying to figure out if they want to do a whole cycle because it's a grind. It's a lot of investment. It's a lot of travel. So, yeah, there are a lot of holes to fill and a lot of spots to bring on, and there'll be a very young and inexperienced squad.
Which, given the taking a break aspect, I find it very interesting. I just want to throw it out there that the majority of these athletes that are missing or are taking time off opted to play in Love for the purpose of playing at home. I have done this before where you go play overseas for 9 months, you come back home and you're not really home because you have to be at the localized training center. and you do that for 3 months, it's tough. But for the ones who chose to stay domestic for professional play, I'm not sure I would use that as an excuse.
I mean, you give yourselves 3 years to the Olympics, but at the same time, if your goal is to win a gold medal, all of your competition is continuing to play. They're continuing to gel as a team. They're continuing to integrate the new players. Like, are you really that good that as a program you can sit the majority of your starting players and you are going to come back and just win when you all decide to play? Like, from a performance standpoint, it's tough because you're not the clear-cut favorites, in my opinion.
Adam touched on it. Your competition is continuing to compete. Let's put a bookmark in that because we are going to return to that. But let's just go over the wide roster selection for people who maybe don't know.
How do you want to do this? Do we want to just go through the roster, or do we want to talk about snubs position by position, or go over it and then talk about snubs? I like talking about snubs.
We can talk about some potential snubs and our thoughts on the choices in general. How about?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with the setters. So the setters that were named to the wide roster were Jordan Poulter, Jenna Gray, former setter for Stanford, Rachel Fairbanks, Ella Mae Powell, who played for Washington, and Sage Kahina-Torres, who played for Love Austin this past season.
What are your overall thoughts, and who do you think is missing?
Looking at this list, I'm like, okay, they clearly did something to keep Poulter around because every other Olympian was like, peace, we're taking the summer off. So my thought was like, Sullivan's thinking, if all else goes sideways and we cannot pass the ball and we cannot do anything, at least we'll have an experienced setter who can at least put the ball in a hittable position. Like, having experience in the setting position is critical. So I'm not surprised that they somehow got her to play.
She might hate her life, though. There is the possibility that she is more track athlete than setter this season.
We will touch on the outsides in a bit. I'm shocked that Kahina-Torres is there. Given how she played in the Love season, I was jaw on the floor.
Where do you think she's going to play Love next year?
Probably for Eric Sullivan at Austin. Fairbanks, I felt like she would be in the conversation eventually. Powell, I'm like, ow.
Well,
These are wild.
I mean, Fairbanks did a great job this season. There's potential there. And the thing is, you never really know how a college athlete is going to transition to the professional ranks unless you give them a chance. So out of all of these, Fairbanks is the one that makes the most sense to me.
I think Cammie Minor is missing.
That, for me, was also the one. I think she had potential to play at this level.
I did hear, however, that she hasn't graduated yet, and she finishes school like a week before VNL starts.
Well, and that's fair. If there are reasons for that, so be it. But that was a noticeable absence from the list.
Yeah. These aren't bad choices. The one, my question mark with Sage. But I think throughout my history playing against and watching USA Volleyball, the Americans have always been a very strong setting country. And so the fact that I don't see anybody other than Poulter like jump out at me as like, yes, this person can run the show is concerning.
Well, I mean, you had 5 American setters setting in Love this year who were all like Olympic caliber or in the gym and around that level, and you only have 1 on this roster. Like, there is a serious...
Well, 2. Fairbanks as well.
Fair. You're going to have a serious turnaround in that position, and it's, in my opinion, after Poulter, it's open. It's fair game. So I like having 4 young setters here to come in and see who can take the reins, but there is a large drop-off, in my opinion, between Poulter and the rest of these.
100%. I honestly think Izzy Stark is the future long term. I just think because of her age, it would be too tough to get her in for LA because she's
not going to set for
will
LA
have
again.
Graduated like a year before. Like, it's just too tight. But I think like long term, Izzy Stark is the answer. But hopefully Jordan Poulter can avoid injury and get them through this season.
Do you see any of the other kind of older, I'm not calling them old, but older setters for the Team USA coming back next year?
Well, Carlini already announced that she's done with USA.
Okay.
So Micah Hancock I could potentially see. She's early 30s, early to mid 30s. This would probably be her last run. I wouldn't be surprised either way. But the thing for me is, like, you're hosting the Olympics. If you're on the edge age-wise, play anyway.
Well, and this is something that you need to consider going forward, is athletes who might normally retire, being in the Olympics in your home country is a huge deal. There are great financial opportunities. It's an amazing experience to have your friends and family there, to be here. Like, this could potentially extend some careers for USA players who were maybe on the edge and wondering if traveling for 4 more years was worth it.
All right, let's dive into the outside hitters on this roster.
Oh, boy.
We have got Avery Skinner, Ali Franti, Kalia Lanier, Ronnie Jones-Perry, Sarah Franklin, Mackenzie Adams, and Logan Eggleston.
What is the first thing you think about when you see this list?
That 4 out of the 7 played in love, and a lot of them won't be able to pass.
That's the thing that... So this, for me, signals a shift in philosophy for U.S. volleyball, which I think is interesting. So generally, when you think about the U.S. teams for the last decade, 2 decades, incredible ball control, very good setters, run a super fast offense.
Unstoppable middles, basically.
Unstoppable middles, but not super physical on the pins. So they're running speed, they're holding the middle of the court, and that's how they've played. You are transitioning to more physical, heavy swinging outsides with this list, and your ball control, like, there's no Jordan Larson. There's no person who can come in and just say, I'm going to pass, with the libero 3/4 of the court. We're going to lock it down. You just pass a sliver and away we go. There are going to be seams on this court between passers, between liberos, that are going to be exposed by very good serving countries, and I'm curious to see how this goes from a passing standpoint.
100%. So Eggleston, Adams, Franklin, Jones-Perry.
They're big.
Like, literally all of them, I'm like, passing liability. Okay. Avery Skinner started in Paris. I have no questions with her. Absolutely not. Ali Franti, coming off the bench for Vakif Bank. She was on the travel rosters for several VNL squads in the last little while, kind of phased out a little bit with the emergence of Plummer and Skinner in recent years, but I can get behind it, I guess.
I'm wondering how her passing is going to be, having been in Vakif Bank. Like, has she gotten better being around great servers, playing in those leagues, playing against that level of athlete? I'm curious.
Well, Lanier, same thing, was on the bench at Conigliano. I mean, you're playing behind Gubby and Juting.
But that's
fair.
To me, that's how you get better. So I'm curious to see how those two specifically look at VNL, because we haven't seen them play a ton.
Like, you were on the bench, but you were in the gym training against the best players in the world. Lanier playing for the best team in the world, even as a sub, for in her case, I think a couple years. So I am fine with those decisions. Do I think Ronnie Jones-Perry is an international caliber at left side? No. Mackenzie Adams? Also no. Eggleston? Franklin, even, like, I don't know, the 4 who came from Love for me, and don't misinterpret what I'm saying as it's like because they came from Love. That's not what this is. When I see the standard that USA has set over the years, they just aren't it.
I don't disagree with you. And the thing is, with them coming from Love, is you don't have a sample size of what they can do against the best players. Those are 4 question marks. At least you know with Franti and Lanier, somebody from the top organizations in the world saw something in them that said, you belong in the gym with us. Because I'll tell you what, that third position, that third outside position is important for those teams. You don't know when you're going to have an injury. You don't know. And let's be honest, you get better training not really playing. So the fact that they were in the gym doing that day in and day out, like that's the important piece for those players. And so I'm very curious to see, there's going to be a ton of video, there's going to be a ton of preparation, what you're going to see from a block defense standpoint. Like if you're hoping that those 4 athletes are hitting out of double blocks consistently against the top teams in the world, that's a tall order for me. I think outsides are going to struggle in VNL this year given this list.
And maybe we'll eat our words. Maybe they'll prove us wrong. I don't know. But in consultation with, as we mentioned, Avid Volley, we kind of went through some potential snubs in the outside position. Curious what you guys think about this. So one potential snub is Simone Lee. She played at Penn State, was playing for Valifoglia in Italy this year. She's going to go play in Brazil in Rio next season. So she was a potential question mark of like, why are you not here? And another one was Tori Stafford.
The thing, I'm not sure how old Tori Stafford is, but I was surprised she's not on any of the USA teams.
She's not on U23.
So
along
with this VNL roster, USA sends teams to the Under-21 World Championships and the Under-23 World Championships. So a lot of those athletes who are in college can play on those teams. So at first I didn't see her on the list because I think she's got good potential. I'm not sure right now she's better than any of these players or who you would replace her with, but you would think given her caliber and what she's done so far, you would be potentially thinking about her. So when she wasn't on even a U23 roster, I was a little surprised.
And maybe, she's new to the Texas program and they wanted more time with her in the gym before they start their season. Like, I don't know. But
I think the curious thing is, was that a personal choice or was that a program choice?
Yeah, fair. The other one that was thrown out, which I'm not sure I would consider this a snub, is Maddie Kubik.
No, I don't.
I don't think she's at the level of the athletes that are on the list currently.
Agreed.
Again, when you go through the potential snub list and you see how few legit possibilities there are, it's like you realize just how big a hole these veterans not showing up are leaving.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's massive. Because, like, would I pick some of these players for a wide roster? No. But when you take away the experienced veterans, like, there really aren't that many good options.
The other one who's missing, and we believe that it was a personal choice, but Jess Merzick is not on this list.
Yes. I think she came out and said that she is burnt out and she needs a break.
I don't know if we want to talk about this here or there, but in my opinion, this is a mistake.
I think it's a huge mistake.
You are a young athlete. You didn't have an amazing season at Love. You are competing for one of 4 spots for the 2028 Olympics. As a coaching staff, when you're that young with no experience, and don't get me wrong, burnout is a thing. I get it. You have to make decisions for yourself, but everybody is in the same position. For you to do that, I think this hurts her chance of making the roster down the road, regardless of how good she becomes.
I agree. I mean, with the veterans taking the summer off, this was your chance to prove your worth and to show how valuable you are, because you might not get this opportunity again. When those players, if those players come back, they are experienced, they know how to win, they will be selected to the roster, and like, you may have missed the boat.
Yeah, even if you're injured, if you can get on that roster and be around and show the coaching staff how hard you work, how diligent you are, your intangibles, like all of that matters when you're picking a roster. I think she's going to regret this decision.
This is part of pro sports. Like, yeah, sometimes you are tired. Sometimes you feel burnt out. And she alluded to some mental health struggles and stuff, like in a post after Love. And it's like, I sympathize with what you're going through. It is very hard to jump levels and kind of be thrown into the spotlight. Trust me, been there. But you also have to think about your career long term. And maybe she doesn't, this isn't important to her.
Well, and again, I'm not saying it's the wrong decision for her. I'm saying if her goal is to play at the Olympics in 2028, this is a setback and potentially one you can't come back from.
The final potential snub is Kendall Kipp, who played at Stanford, was with Vakifbank in Turkey, recently signed with Bergamo in Italy. Word on the street is she is rehabbing an injury. So I'm assuming they would have put her on the list, but due to injury, they didn't want to use a roster spot if she wouldn't be ready.
Yeah, and again, we're not aware of the conversations that are going on between the programs and the athletes. So just looking at the list, I would agree with you.
Okay, opposites.
Everybody's favorite position.
We have got Madison Skinner, Taylor Mims, Danielle Coutinho, Olivia Babcock, Logan Lednicki, and Stephanie Samity.
There are a couple people missing from this list, in my opinion. I probably would have put Kennedy Martin on this list. I know she's super young and very inexperienced. I also didn't see her on any of the U21 or U23 rosters, although I may be mistaken. But there's an athlete who's physical, who probably has a future. The Olympics are 4 years away. She might be ready. If I was going to take a flyer on a player, it would probably be her, to get her into the gym, to see what she's like, to see how she responds to coaching. I think she has a ton of upside. I would have liked to see her on the list as like not ready to play now, but you want her in the system.
The other question that I think people might have is Tessa Grubbs, who started over Danielle Coutinho for the majority of the Love season, was dominant in Love until she got injured. And Coutinho, who played basically behind her all season, made the roster and she didn't. So that was actually one of the questions we had this week, is why that happened.
I agree with everything that's being said there. I think that I would have taken Tessa as well. The only question is, how far back did her injury set her? Would she be ready? And, what was that conversation like? But from a performance standpoint, all things being equal in terms of health, I would have taken Grubbs personally.
Well, she was dressed for the matches at the end of Love. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that means that she's fine, but yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I was a little surprised that she wasn't on the list and Coutinho was.
Well, the other, like, Lednicki for me, she's good. It's fine. She's good, but she's like a little more raw than the other ones.
This is what I come back to.
If you're comparing kids in college, though, Logan Lednicki is not Olivia Babcock, and Kennedy Martin, like, if you're going to take Lednicki, take Martin. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
If we're comparing kids that are that age, that is confusing to me. Skinner, sure, we've talked about her. Mims, she's played for Novara for the last couple seasons, formerly for Washington State. Like, Novara's a top team in Italy. Like, I can get behind that. Coutinho's a question mark, especially because she was, like, only good for the last few matches in Love. Yeah. Babcock, I think she's your future. Samity, I haven't seen her play. She's been in Japan for a little bit, but in college, I wasn't a huge fan. Lednicki, raw, like...
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to when I'm looking at this roster, I'm comparing to the other international rosters, to the players sitting in those. Like, who on this list is going up against Boskovic? Who is going...
At this point, nobody.
And that's my point, right? So
who's going to go head-to-head with Paula Egonu? None of them.
So it's... Again, you're building towards 2028. I understand that you're looking for your future in the program. There's just so many question marks about how these athletes are going to transition to the international game. And it doesn't mean they're not good. That's not what we're saying. It's just, you have a fraction of volleyball players who go to college, and you have an even smaller fraction of players who can go play at the next level. And if the ball control is not as good as they are used to, which is, I think, a fair question mark at this point, which of these players is going to be able to score out of system consistently against an international block defense? That's the question you're looking to answer.
Again, there are holes to be filled. I understand why the majority of these athletes were picked. For me, the snub definitely comes to Tessa Grubbs.
Yeah, agreed.
Because she has proven herself.
More than somebody else on this list.
More than
direct comparison.
Exactly, direct comparison. All right, 2 positions to go, everybody. Let's talk about middle blockers. So the middle blockers announced to the list were Breon Butler, formerly of Texas, played in Japan this past season, Amber Ijid, Anna Dodson, played for UCLA after she just graduated, signed for the second half in Italy. Will return to Italy next season for Pinerolo, medium team. Dana Retke, Asia O'Neill, Tia Jimerson, Molly McCage, Serena Gray. Okay, I'm sorry. Tia Jimerson came out of nowhere. She had one good love season, which further emphasizes my point about Tessa Grubbs. I would say same situation, similar situation coming in where you're like, yeah, you might be on the bench. Like, we don't really know what to expect of you. Both of them performed well in love. One of them makes this roster. The other one doesn't. I definitely have questions about Jimerson. Definitely have questions about Anna Dodson. And I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the Jimerson pick. I thought...
Really?
She's dynamic. She's raw. I think that there's upside there. I kind of feel like she got better and better with the coaching that she received. So, for me...
I just envision her going head-to-head with Sarah Farr.
Yeah.
Or, like, Zara Gunish from Turkey. And just these girls, like...
Right. Again, I'm not saying that she's at that point. I'm saying she's gotten better. She improved. You put her in a situation where she was successful. She's relatively physical. So give her a chance to see where she can go. I'm more okay with that pick than some of the other ones.
Like what ones?
I mean, I haven't seen Dodson, but that would be one.
Trust me, I did UCLA games all season. She's not the answer. I'm shocked that she is on the list.
Yeah. And... McCage
played well in the Final Four of Love.
Yeah.
Asia O'Neill wasn't even a starter on her Love team, barely sniffed the court, and you're going to put her on the VNL roster? Same with Serena Gray. Tori Dixon was starting over her. And you're on the VNL roster? Like, I understand that we were saying Serena Gray should be starting all season, but I'm just like... What is your criteria for picking these names?
This list to me more than anything is about what you think you can have down the future, because none of these athletes are international caliber at this point.
Maybe Breon Butler, maybe.
I mean, you have Dana Retke,
who had a terrible season at Eczacıbaşı, who was on the bench for the last, at least she has experience in that environment.
Well, and she's a relatively good blocker, but offensively, she needs to put more work in because, again, if you look at the caliber of middles that the USA has historically had, there is a significant drop-off here from what they're used to. Who's missing from this list that you think should be there?
For me, Andy Jackson.
Agreed.
Now, we did hear that Nebraska's kind of keeping their players at home this summer. Understandable. Coaching change. There's a big shift. There's a lot to kind of work through with that system, particularly for a program where the expectation is to win. But, yeah, I have heard that Nebraska's keeping players at home.
I don't want to talk about that right now. I have my own opinions about.
See, Adam needs everybody to like him, so he just doesn't say the things that might be controversial, and then I say them, and then everybody comes at me.
I didn't know if this was the place
it's fine.
To talk about that, but
this is another instance that kind of highlights the massive generational gap and just how strong this former generation has been.
100%.
Because I don't know who else I would pick. I understand I'm critical of these picks, but after that generation that won those 3-4 medals in a row, it's there's a drop.
There's a void there for sure, and they have to be filled. Players are going to have to step up, and it'll be interesting to see. It's like you said, there's nothing, you don't have any issue with these athletes per se, but there are very big shoes to fill with very little experience.
I do have some issues. I just went through some of my issues,
issues, but again, who would you replace them with?
Exactly.
It's not that the picks are bad. It's just that there's some of these athletes are going to have to surprise us for the U.S. to kind of stay ranked where they are.
And again, when I'm talking about these athletes, it's based on the standard that USA has set over the years for the last 3 cycles. Yes, even if there might not be better options, from the standard that the USA has, I think this is lacking.
They are in a rebuild.
Again, huge. I think it's a huge mistake for those veterans to just take time off.
The only other middle, not the only other, but one of the other middles who I thought might be on this roster who's not is Sammy Francis. I like the way she plays. She's big. She's physical. She's got a little attitude to her. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I didn't see her on any of the rosters. I don't know if she's over 23.
Well, I think also she had to go back to school after Love too, right?
That's true. Nah, there might be a school issue.
Maybe that's a school issue as well.
But she's somebody else who I would have my eye on if I was running the program.
Okay, final group are the liberos. We've got Morgan Hentz, who played PVF for Atlanta, Lexi Rodriguez, Zoe Jarvis, and Lauren Briseño, who played at Baylor. I know you have a huge snub here. Just let us hear it.
I mean, you know my opinions on liberos. I think Elena Scott has risen to all of the occasions that she's been put into. And I'm a big fan of her setting. I'm a big fan of how she plays the game. Attitude, I think she has a lot of intangibles from what you can see watching her play. I'm surprised she's not on this list.
I think that's a huge snub. I don't know if that was a decision by her to take the summer off or whatever.
If it was, that's a massive mistake.
If that was, she made a huge error. This was her chance. Justine's taking the summer off. But if she didn't make that choice, that was a huge miss.
Agreed.
By the staff.
I agree.
I don't know what Zoe Jarvis is doing on this list. I'm sorry. What are you doing there? Morgan Hentz, I can get behind. She is more of a veteran. She was the backup to Justine for the last cycle, totally. 100%. Lexi Rodriguez, I feel like a lot of people believe... She was going to get
her chance.
Yes, they were going to give her a chance. They believe she is the future. I can get behind that. The other two...
Yeah.
Particularly Jarvis. Briseño, I haven't seen her play enough to really have an opinion, but yeah.
I mean, we'll see. So those are our impressions of the USA
Let's
roster.
just talk about how many Texas athletes there are on this roster,
Okay.
shall we?
All right. Here we go.
Jarvis, McCage, O'Neal, Butler, Skinner, Eggleston, Kahina, Torres. At least 7. Maybe I missed someone. I was scanning through real quick. Just saying.
I think this is a slippery slope. I've seen
For
it.
who? For me or for the program?
No, for the program. And again, it's year 1 of the cycle. You're guaranteed a spot. You know, you have a lot of senior athletes either sitting out or retiring. As a coach, you need to put a good showing in, and you know these athletes. However, there is always a bias towards people you know and you've worked with if those relationships have gone well. And you better make sure that if you make those choices, those players live up to expectation, because the scrutiny of those players will be higher than the other ones. So if none of those other players get put on rosters and don't perform, that's a tough look starting a cycle. This, in my opinion, was a real gamble. And TBD to see if this pans out. Because if it doesn't, and you pulled 7 athletes that you've previously worked with, that looks like favoritism, which is not a great place for a program to be for athletes coming in. That's not the culture or the environment that you want. And it's definitely not the environment that Karch had. Karch got rid of great players because their attitude stunk. Flat out, this is what it takes to win. I'm curious to see how this plays out. All right, so I went through and pulled VNL rosters for the top 5 or 6 teams.
We were curious, basically, if other countries were kind of going through the same transition that the Americans were going through, or which veteran players were leaving. So Adam did some digging.
So let's start with Italy. Italy is returning 10 players. From their Olympic roster. From their Olympic roster. So, again, from the Olympic roster. And I would say the only one of note who is missing would be Bossetti.
Yeah.
And so Italy is going to be very strong. They have to be looking to win VNL this year. And quite frankly, they are probably better than the U.S. in every position.
Hands down. And a lot of these athletes are in their 30s.
Yeah.
They all play pro, and they decided to come back. So Italy is fully loaded, ready to rumble.
Brazil is returning 8 players from their Olympic roster. You're missing 2 liberos, Thaisa, who was more of a figurehead.
She's 38.
Yeah,
She's
retiring. I would say the most noticeable missing player would be Kat Aldermiddle, who is very good. So she's probably...
Not sure if she's done with national team. Maybe she is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. She's 34, so she would be 38 going into the next cycle. She could be taking a break, but she's missing.
We've got Roberta, the setter, coming back, Gabi, Anna Cristina, Rosa Maria, Bergman.
They're going to be loaded.
They're fine.
They have 8 returning, but they're all very good players, lots of experience. They're going to be a very strong team. Next would be China. China's returning 8 players. They have a decent amount of turnover. Now, the thing about China is their athletes are quote-unquote old at a younger age.
At 26.
Yeah, I mean, they start much younger. The wear and tear of their system is a little bit higher.
Having played in China for a couple seasons, it is rare for athletes to play into their 30s.
So they do have some roster turnover, but, I mean, they're always strong. They have athletes coming, playing pro.
But are still returning 8.
Yeah, they're still returning a starting lineup. They're going to be solid.
Zhu Ting is taking the summer off, it looks like.
Yeah.
She's 30, which for a Chinese volleyball player is considered old.
Now, they did retire both of their setters, so it'll be interesting to see who comes in, what the offense looks like, what that transition is. That was of note and interesting. If we look at Poland, they also are returning 8 athletes. A couple retiring. Their setter is 35.
I mean, Volosh, that's a big piece. She is going to continue to play pro, but that's a big piece that they're going to be missing.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see who steps in there to set. They had a young middle blocker who's also not coming back by the name of...
Alagirska.
Yeah, I think she played for some decent pro teams. But again...
But the foundation is there.
Yeah, you're returning 8 of your athletes, so they're going to be good. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. Serbia is only returning 4 athletes, similar to the U.S., but they struggled in the last Olympics.
They were very bad last season. They won Worlds the year before and then came out last year in the Olympic year and were honestly terrible.
Yeah.
Guidetti was coaching them, left to go coach Canada.
TBD on how that's going to work out.
Yeah. So they have a lot of turnover here.
And some older athletes, but also some younger athletes. So they are, I would say this is a full rebuild program-wise.
Most notable returner is Boskovic. If without her, they're in trouble.
Correct.
But Dirtsa left. She was setting for Fenerbahce this year. Busha left. Onjenovic is 40. She was a setter. She was kind of like backup, just there for assurance purposes the last year. Jovana Stevanovic, she plays for Zazibashi, but hasn't really been starting for the national team. Kortajic, who was the middle for Milano, she's a notable miss for me.
Now, I could see a lot of these athletes waiting to see what the program looks like, how much funding they have, how it's all going to look like. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these players back next year, but that program is going to be in flux this year, I would say.
Well, I would say that's the only top team that is kind of going through the same thing that the U.S.
Correct.
is because, and we only looked at like the top teams.
Yeah.
Because when we look at Turkey.
Well, they're returning 11 players. They're going to be the exact same.
Like the only player they're not returning really is their 37-year-old middle, Erdem, which, okay, makes sense. But they're fully intact.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I don't know what you think about this, but I think like looking at this and what the other top teams are doing, all of whom play professionally, all of whom are in their late 20s to mid 30s, all of them have chosen to play this season. So I'm thinking that this decision by the American veterans and Olympians is very questionable.
So it's interesting. The U.S. has a bit of a different situation than anybody else, any of the other top teams in the world. So all of the national teams get to watch their athletes from a young age play professionally against the best athletes in the world. You have a very good sample size of who your athletes are coming through just because of where they play. Because a lot of the American athletes, almost all of them, play college first, you only see them against their peers, not against the best in the world. And while I think having a pro league in the U.S. is a very good idea long term, until you can pull some of those top athletes in the world to play here, you have no idea what Sarah Franklin looks like against a top block in the world. You have no idea what all of the other young U.S. players look like in this situation. You have less data for these U.S. players than any other country in the world. And that is a very interesting place to be in when it comes to roster construction. And so, I understand you want to throw these young athletes into the fire and see, what do we have? How do we compete? Can you play at that speed? Can you play at that size? What is your mentality like when, you're up against it and you have to hit against that block? So I don't necessarily disagree with having all of these younger athletes on the roster, and maybe you didn't have a choice because
he might not have had a choice, but I'm saying like the athletes to make that choice I think is questionable.
Yeah, fair
I'm not
enough.
saying Sullivan made the choice necessarily, but for the athletes to choose that.
Yeah, I don't know, it's going to be a very interesting watch to see how they compete against these teams.
And just quickly going through the Canadian roster, pretty much everybody that was expected to be there is there, with the exception of Alexa Gray.
So their most important player.
I think the absence of Gray is going to hurt them way more than they might think.
I would agree with that.
And I don't know, maybe she chose to take the time off. I don't know what the reason is for her not playing, but I think her absence is going to seriously be felt.
Agreed.
The other question was, where's Jen Cross? Jen Cross had ACL surgery, I want to say last year. So she was nearing the end of her career anyways. I don't know if she recovered. I don't know if she's planning on playing again, but that is what had happened to her. But all the other people who were there in the run-up to the Olympics, Brie O'Reilly, Kira Van Ryk, Shaina Joseph, Hillary Howe, Emily Maglio, Jasmine White, the core group that made the run at the Paris Olympics is still there, minus Gray.
I mean, if you're going to qualify, this is the quad to do it because the U.S. is in automatically. So you better have it together.
Yeah, this is Canada's chance, honestly. In looking at what is kind of being thrown out there from the international teams and what the commitments are made there, how do we think this American team will do in VNL?
So they're currently ranked 3rd in the world, correct?
Yeah.
If I had to bet, I would say they will squeak into the top 8 for VNL. If I had to guess, I would say they will be 7.
Really?
Are you lower
You're
than
being
that?
more generous than me. Maybe they will squeak into the final 8.
Listen,
But by U.S. standards, that's terrible.
no, they're going to take a dip, no question. But I think just because they don't have experience doesn't mean that you won't find a couple athletes who can rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
They're big, they're physical, they have assets here, they have Poulter to lead them. They all know how to play volleyball. They're not going to compete with the Italys and the Brazils, in my opinion. But
Turkey.
Yeah, but they will. I think if the roster is managed properly and they take what they learn and they adjust and they play to win versus giving players a chance to see who they are, I think they can finish 7.
That might be fair. I figured it would be a stretch, a push for them, a challenge to make the final 8.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be playing meaningful games at the end of the tournament to get in. But could Avery Skinner be all world for 3 weeks? Sure. Could Madison Skinner figure it out on the right side and score points? 100% they have the capabilities to do that. They have the capabilities not to do that. But that it wouldn't surprise me if 3 or 4 of the athletes on that list play really, really well. And again, you have those teams that are in the 6 to 10 bubble. The U.S. has the swagger factor. When they step on the court, that's probably worth a few points.
Not when you're playing Turkey or Italy, because they'll be like, who are these people?
Yeah, but that's not who I'm talking about. Who was playing when they play Canada? If they're playing...
Well, Canada's going to be like, this is our chance to win. We better not mess this up.
Yeah, but
and
they still have to do
mental.
it. Yeah, but who are the teams? What does that look like when they play Japan? What does that look like? Those
Germany,
teams... Yeah,
Netherlands.
Exactly. At the end of the day, they're still wearing the USA uniform.
I think the story for me is going to be who is named to the World Championship roster.
Yes.
Okay, you know what? You don't want to come back and play national team for a couple months. Sure, your choice. The story for me will be who decides to show up for World Championships. And if the roster looks the same then, that'll be a different conversation.
Well, if I'm running the program, I'm looking at this as a fact-finding and a character-determining, summer. And then you're trying to win world championships, as you are every year. So it'll be a very interesting summer in the USA gym.
Okay, let's dive into some listener questions. We did address a few of them over the course of the episode, but here are the ones that we didn't directly talk about. Question 1. What new athletes do you think are going to be on the 2028 Olympic team, and which longtime members won't be on that roster? Do you think Dana Rettke will see playing time if she's on the roster again?
I think Dana Rettke will see playing time. You know, assuming that she continues to get better and to keep growing. To me, she's one of their leading candidates in the middle position at this point.
Based on the list that is out there currently, I think she does have a better chance of playing this time around.
Yeah, I mean, right now, depending on what happens with Washington, her and Ogbogu are kind of my 1-2.
Washington Ogbogu would be my 2 picks still. I'm assuming Ogbogu will be back.
Yeah. I question mark on Washington. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So which longtime players do I think won't be back? We know Carlini's out. Jordan Larson's out. I bet Annie Drews will not be around till 2028. Cook is a question mark for me, but I feel like she will want to play at home for the Olympics.
And I agree with you. I think whether she gets that spot or not depends on how the rest of the team passes.
Agreed. I think the ball control issue will be very obvious very quick, and if they need somebody like her, I can see them calling her back. The new players, who from this VNL roster do you think could be there long term?
I mean, Poulter, Skinner, Rettke. Those 5.
I would probably add maybe one of Henson Rodriguez, and I'd probably add Babcock.
Babcock is fair.
I think the other ones are honestly up in the air.
Yeah. I mean, if you made me pick, those would be the ones. Like, would I be shocked? Could Franklin, raise the level of her game? Sure. Will she? There's just so many question marks. I'd love to answer this question again after we watch VNL.
I mean, some of these players are going to have to make the roster because they're all of the veterans are not coming back. Yeah. So a few of them will have to be staples. Maybe we'll revisit this after VNL.
Yeah. Again, you have to see them play at this level. How out of place do they look? Or what's their decision-making like? How do they compare to the speed and size? Lots of questions.
Question 2, if you were in Eric Sullivan's shoes, how would you have gone about the VNL roster building process? I
mean, probably pretty similarly, to be honest.
I hate to say it, we're ripping this roster apart, and then we're but we wouldn't have changed anything.
Well, but you have to, again, because you don't have, and I mentioned this before, the data of seeing these players against international rosters, you have to give them a chance. You don't know which diamond in the rough is out there who just loves playing at this level. And so, we talked about some snubs who we thought should be on that roster, whether they declined or they didn't want to be there or they were program decisions, TBD. But this year is about seeing what you have. And it will be more interesting, like you said, to see what decisions come out of VNL for Worlds.
Question 3, who do you think will take over the national team setting position, not just for LA28, but into the future, for future cycles? So this person listed some potentials as being Cami Minor, Rachel Fairbanks, Jenna Gray, Bergen Riley, Izzy Stark. Poulter and Hancock are on the older side, but who do you see leading this team into the future? My pick is Izzy Stark. I think she's the future for USA Volleyball. She's big. She's mobile. She's good in and out of system. She is my long-term pick, but I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I like Izzy Stark as well. I think Cami Minor is very good. To me, it would be Izzy Stark right now would be my number 1 with my number 2 tied between Cami and Fairbanks, kind of fighting it out to see. I think both of them have strengths and weaknesses. I'd want to see them run a team with all of USA weapons.
Okay, our last question, Adam, in the hot seat. Who do you have for your 3 middle blockers for LA 20 to 28? In an ideal world, like, we don't know who's gonna, like, there are some question marks about retirement, obviously, but
Washington, Retke, and Obagu.
he didn't even hesitate.
Now, I will put one caveat on that. I think Andy Jackson definitely has the potential to make this roster potentially instead of Retke. She's more offensive-minded.
She's more dynamic.
And more dynamic. So she's one that I would keep my eye on. She's not on the roster, so I don't know what her plans are.
Well, she's only going to have 2 years post-college before the games, too.
Yeah. Now, if she's allowed to play national team next year, I think that makes a big difference. I like the way she plays. I like how dynamic she is. And I think the U.S. is going to need to be dynamic in the middle to compete. So I think she's a dark horse for me. And I think that Sammy Francis, to me, she's behind Andy Jackson, but she's got potential. And I'd be curious to see her, with a full professional season under her belt. Those would be my kind of 3+2. I think the first year after the Olympics is always interesting in terms of which teams are retiring players, which currently the U.S. looks like they're doing, new head coaches, new systems, different funding. It kind of sets the foundation for what your plans are going into the next Olympics. I think that with the Olympics being in the U.S., there's an incredible amount of pressure. I don't disagree with them looking at all of the options and trying to figure out what they have and what the choices are. I think this summer is going to be very telling, especially for the U.S. I think for the other top countries, what you're going to get. Most of them are returning their players. I think after LA, you'll see a lot of turnover in some of those other programs. But for this Olympics, I don't see much movement in those top kind of 5 countries, and it'll be up to the U.S. to raise their young players to that level.
Well, let us know your thoughts. We were very opinionated as always, but let us know what you're thinking as far as the roster as it is, the choices that were made based on who is taking time off, who do you think is coming back. There's a lot of things to speculate about, but the VNL for women starts not this week, but next week, June 3rd, so be sure to tune in. And we will be covering the men's VNL rosters next week. That concludes this week's episode of Volley Talk. There's always something shaking in the volleyball world, and we hope you enjoyed this little fix. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss any updates, and we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a 5-star review. You can also find us on Instagram at volleytalk_podcast. If you have a topic that you want us to discuss, be sure to let us know by reaching out to us on Instagram or at info@sarahpavin.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week.